Well, not work stuff. I was just kidding. Like, what fun stuff are you gonna do?
That was fun. That's like another.
Okay, never mind. I was trying to kill time. Okay.
Fun, right?
All right, I passed it to, okay, it's recorded, but it's recording on my account on the phone. Okay,
Okay,
go for it.
thank you. Thank you very much. And today, as you have read from the Slack channel, I will talk about Revit, Dynamo, and Python, and in some way how we can relate these software and programming languages to graphic neural network and brick schema, to give a huge summary of what we are going to see. And to give you an overview of the main topics that we will go through, we will start from a brief introduction of the building information modeling in Revit, very quick, just to be aligned and to know what we are talking about. And then suddenly we will shift the focus on Dynamo, starting from the basics, talking about specifically Dynamo for Revit, because as we will have the opportunity to see, Dynamo can be used also in other platforms, within other platforms. And we will take a look at the Revit database thanks to Revit API. Then lastly, about the tool, we will see how Python can be used within Dynamo. And we will have like 7 examples in which we go really into Dynamo and try to make some workflow and see how it really works. Then we will focus the attention on the building information modeling and graphic neural network link, thanks to 2 main tools that are Network X and Neo4j. And lastly, let's say the main accomplishment of this work, that is trying to link building information modeling to brick schema, thanks to RDF-Lib, that is a Python package that we will see together in the following slides. Okay, so very quickly, I want to underline the difference between building information modeling and computer-aided design, and why is so important to understand that when we are talking about Autodesk Revit, so in this case, building information modeling, we are talking about a total different tool with respect to AutoCAD, that is a computer-aided design. While in AutoCAD, we draw simple lines without properties, when we are dealing with building information models like the ones that Revit is able to provide, we are talking about information. So everything we put into the model is an object full of properties. And these properties, as we can see in the following slide, can be used within different platforms. So why are we using BIM today? Because basically BIM is able to manage the construction process all over the phases of which it's made, and starting from the design phase, shifting to the operation and maintenance, and then in this process BIM is able to give a tool to manage all the phases of this workflow. It's important.
So sorry, can I interrupt?
Of course, within the formal workshops.
So, okay, before we go further, who here has Revit experience, let's say, or building information model experience? Okay, so those of you online cannot see, but Yiting and Yunchuan, you guys from the program, right? The PFM program. What is it? Propatio's classes, right? Or is it other stuff? In your diploma also, okay. Who else? Oh, Charlene, of course, also. Sorry. Who else?
Yeah.
June also, what's your experience?
So in the course, I try to use Revit to do the AI model to do.
Okay. So like in your undergraduate degree or master's?
A master's degree.
Master's degree. Okay. Julian, no? Filippo, I mean, you work in like a design firm, right?
Yes.
So you have like how much experience or what?
Let's say that my role within the corporate is being coordinator. So for the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing stuff.
Okay,
So this is my expertise in the field, and I really use Revit
so like the last
daily. So
like 20 years or like 10,
five years.
five-ish years.
When I let's
Okay.
say make an interview, take an interview, I say 5 years because I started studying 5 years ago, and
And you've been working in this field for about 5 years, and then you came back to do your PhD, right? Something like that.
I started doing the PhD while I was already working.
Okay.
So it was like a parallel path
Yeah.
that I developed.
Okay.
Within
Mario,
last years.
BIM, AutoCAD.
I once did like mechanical CAD, but not AutoCAD. And I used Revit for like 2 days.
Okay. For the
No, I just tagged along for like a company that switched over to Revit.
okay,
Just tagged along for their introductory course.
got it. How about those of you online? I saw Mahmoud had his hand up. What kind of experience, Mahmoud? I know you were an architect, right? Were you like a practicing architect? Well, of course you used it in your in your PhD. We saw that, right? But what else besides that?
Yeah, I'm an architect, so I used to use Revit for design, basically, and also.
Moment we are working on the volume.
Hold on one second.
Can you try again, Mahmoud, please?
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry.
So yeah, because I'm an architect, so I used the Revit for design, basically, and also after some using Revit for some time, I switched to doing programming. So I used IFC to extract spaces and create tools that are that can be used for other applications.
Okay.
So I used it initially for design and then for building some tools.
Okay. Anyone else online who has some Revit or AutoCAD experience?
I have both experience, Revit and AutoCAD.
Okay.
Yes, both during my education and a little bit during my professional career.
Okay. Okay. Excellent.
Yes, I also work in a company after my bachelor's. I use Revit to do also design projects. So
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And Veronica, while we have you, maybe you could do a quick 30-second intro about yourself and what you're working on.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm in my first year here at Perugia in the PhD. My bachelor's and my master's I did in Brazil in Federal University of Santa Catarina. And here I work mostly with wearable sensors, also human-centric approach for comfort, and I'm starting in data analysis.
Great. Well, yeah. Thanks for joining us for this
Thank
session.
you.
Veronica is working with me to the next room project as I
Okay.
told you before. So we are developing together the next room project.
Okay. Okay. So it seems like about a little over half of us have a bit of that experience. The other half are curious about these things. So can you go back to the slide you were just showing about the life cycle of the, okay, slide number 4. So, and I can also say my experience. So before I moved to Singapore, between my master's and when I moved to Singapore, I worked for a design firm, and Revit was kind of like the new thing at that point. This was 2007, 2008. It was the big new thing. And I was basically helping a group transition from AutoCAD to Revit, basically. That was what, 14 years ago. The thing I wanted to bring up, I want to stop like, okay, everybody who have this diversity of knowledge. I can tell you 14 years ago, this graphic probably existed, right?
Yeah, I picked on Google something that was kind of able to give the perception of
Right, right. Oh, whoops. Oh, I think my computer lost internet. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make is, I mean, not that this particular graphic, but this type of schematic of BIM has become, or was in the very beginning, it was the motivation behind moving from AutoCAD to, because you just showed on the next slide, you have drafting, you have lines that are digital lines. Now you have objects that have data attached to them. You're probably, okay, so 14 years ago, this is what we were headed towards. My entire time period spent in the design field, we didn't even start to scratch the surface of using BIM in a data, like a data model type of way. So I guess as we go through this, it'd be good to hear like your thoughts, because out of all of these things that you see in this loop, conceptual design and detailed design are at the top. My hypothesis is that in industry, 99% of the use of Revit models is for those two things only. Would you agree with that? Maybe 95%?
No, I think that also the construction part now is using
Okay,
more,
okay.
because we use Revit on site. For instance, we have a hospital project in Denmark,
Okay.
and people are there with laptops and using Revit to, for instance, match the holes in the wall with the ducts.
Okay.
So is really becoming something also in the construction part of the design process, but still probably it's construction plus design and analysis and documentation. Is fabrication, it's there, but it's not really used at the moment. So 99% is these three main phases: design, analysis, and construction.
So in construction, people are actually having a Revit model or a model, and they're literally saying, we need that hole in the wall right there to be exactly the way it is in the model, right? More or less.
In Italy, like 10 firms actually are doing this.
Okay.
I smaller firm, I don't think they are using that.
Okay.
But medium, big corporates are able to do that, let's say. Because you need people that know how to deal with the model, even if they didn't do it, but they simply received it. So it's not that easy to use on a site, to use and to make the model useful within a site and construction site.
When I was in the design firm, we would take the Revit model and we would just slice it into 2D drawings. And then the contractor would, when I was in the design field, it was kind of like the contractor would look at it and most drawings were somewhat schematic. Meaning that if I put the duct going through the wall exactly at that point, the contractor still had the freedom to move it up or down or to the left or right or whatever. There was a lot of freedom for a contractor to implement your design in maybe a more cost-effective or practical way in the field, which makes all of these like collision detection things a bit obsolete for construction, because they don't actually have to build the real world building doesn't have to be built exactly the same way as the Revit model. But as you move closer to having these models be used in the construction phase, that's kind of the intent, is that everything's supposed to look exactly the same as between the model and the real world. You
underline a good point, because to be fair, the last version of the model, that is the as-built model, adapt itself to the real building.
To what actually happened.
Yes. So and that's the latter part of the, let's say, input information. At least today is the last part. So within the operation and maintenance, we don't have input from user. But during the site, if you have to move something because you didn't really understand what the problem was, you can update the model based on the real construction.
And that's actually happening.
Yes. People, BIM coordinator, these kind of people are working on construction site, and you need to have a big project. If you are building a house, my house doesn't need this kind of.
But like a well-funded, really well-organized project, you're going to have a BIM coordinator on the construction company side who will create an as-built model.
And they signed the contract in which they required three people from our corporate to be in Copenhagen,
Okay.
following the construction site and
Got it.
talking to the other person involved within the design process, because there is a big process for validate the model.
Yeah.
So for instance, we model stuff, then they check what we model, send back to us. It's
Okay.
kind of then inside is kind of the same procedure. So it's an iterative process.
So in 14 years, I'm happy to hear something has like really
What's,
adopted.
What's like the oldest building you've seen that BIM model for, like the oldest BIM model that like was built and done and then you got your hands on, or somebody was working with it again?
I had to correct a model that was used for a construction site in 2016, something like that. The model that has really been used to,
Ancient
but
history.
at least no, it's kind of my case. I am not.
Did it work or did you have compatibility issues already?
Let's say that with respect to AutoCAD, if you really develop the model in Revit, you can see a bunch of stuff that with AutoCAD you couldn't see, because you have 3D objects, and you can have dedicated software for clash detection, for instance, or takeoff quantity is very it's, I mean, you are modeling something. So if you have people that are more or less aware of the tool, it's more difficult to be wrong about this kind of aspect.
Is there anyone who's seen an older BIM model than 6 years?
I mean, 2008, I created the models. So
But you didn't run into them again. You created them and then they disappeared somewhere.
I mean, I could ask my colleagues if my terrible BIM model is still accessible. That's a good question. But I'm guessing that, I mean, Revit, like Autodesk definitely has a lot of legacy software or models that are out there, and so probably it's like Microsoft's stuff. They upgrade your file to the newest version.
Yeah, well, that's one concern, but also it made I kind of suspect people just export it as a PDF and then just have like the drawings from the construction site and use that for maintenance and.
Well, many that do like that.
That's one of the, okay, so the whole point of this like tangent that I made was that, so everyone's aware that in practice, BIM is really slowly creeping into the areas on this loop, but you're right, in the operations phase, they probably just have like a cabinet with the design documentation, hard copy, and that's what they use. Like if they want to know something, they look at these documents.
I've seen something for maintenance that is coming out of this real estate development firm in Milan. They required us to input data in a common data environment that was strictly organized for maintenance purposes.
From a BIM model.
You had to provide IFC models that at least had a certain amount of parameters called in a precise way to be able to talk to it's a very expensive, extremely expensive software that doesn't remember no, maybe it's another one, I don't remember the name, but that is developed to follow the maintenance and operation phase.
Okay, interesting. Just wanted everybody, so those of you that are, so you're really presenting very practical tools that are used quite a bit in the industry. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. So I was quick because I more or less think that everyone knew about it. But if you have a question, please interrupt me so I can explain better. So another really important difference is from building information models and industry foundation classic models. They are let's say related to the same concept, but a BIM model is something that is a format, is a file format in which you can to which you can interact and you can input data. Industry foundation class is something that you can modify, but only in terms of programming, let's say not directly within an interface like Autodesk interface that is Revit. So the main difference is that when you provide a design, probably you need to provide a building information model. When you want to exchange information that is not related to a software house, that is not related to a platform, you theoretically can use industry foundation classes format that is an open means, so everybody can access it without paying for a license. Let's say basically this is the idea, at least behind the IFC. The problem is that it's not very easy to use, and is not there is no awareness in terms of expertise, practical expertise on how to use it. And it's also difficult to use, generally speaking, even if you are able to use programming languages like Python. Last, let's say, in the introductory part, that Revit is not the BIM. Revit is a software. BIM is a process and is also a methodology, let's say. Revit is only what Autodesk do to make us interact with the process, with the methodology. So just to underline that we are talking about a software now today, or together with, about a tool. The BIM process is something bigger with respect to.
What are other products? I don't know where it is.
The Nemeshek has Archicad, that should be the Nemeshek. Then I know Italian brand that Aka Edificius.
But this Revit is kind of the big player.
If I say CAD, probably you think AutoCAD. Yeah. If I say BIM, you will think probably Revit. Yeah. But it's not the same thing. It's Autodesk. I love Autodesk, but it's a product. It's not the methodology, let's say. And they bought the methodology from another corporate that was developing it. It's not something they invented.
If you talk about market share, I would guess Revit is in the building industry. I would guess like 80 or 90%. I mean, I could be wrong. What do you?
If the firm is medium or big,
yeah,
90% of the case use Revit.
And if you're a smaller design firm, you probably still you probably don't use BIM at all, or you might use something more niche.
At least in Italy, or you don't use BIM methodology, okay. Or you can, like, for instance, buy another one. That's a question, maybe. Okay, FreeCAD.
FreeCAD, yeah.
Okay.
But if you're talking about infrastructure, roads, bridges, that kind of stuff, I think it's a lot more diverse. I don't think people use Revit. There's
dedicated tools for that is like civil. Yeah. Civil Autodesk, but it's kind of BIM.
But the market is less monopolized, I think, in other fields.
I'm not working in that field, so yeah. I don't know, but
like Bentley is a company that has a lot of like BIM type stuff for infrastructure in cities. Bentley's a big one. Anyway, I don't know. It's like but Revit was a company that was acquired by Autodesk around the time that I was a designer. That's when that happened.
I think it was like a little bit earlier, but yes, they were yet developing something, right. But because they understood that this would be the future.
Revit or Autodesk acquired them, and then like 4 or 5 years later, it really became kind of
yeah. But the idea was from a small firm, a small software house, let's say. Yeah. That was called kind of brand.
I think Revit was the name of the company.
So I have a question.
Go for it, please.
Yeah, so now, from my understanding, is that the difference between Revit and CAD is that Revit, it has information connected to building information that's connected to the objects, right?
Yes.
So in this case, if we can add this information into the CAD lines, for example, if the line can represent a wall, which with some types of information, then in this sense, maybe AutoCAD is also a BIM model, right? I mean, is there a difference between CAD and Revit in this case?
I think that there is a difference, because what CAD, computer-aided design, is doing is only helping you in representing something. The representation within the BIM framework is an information that you can query from the database. It's a different paradigm, let's say. So even if you start adding information in the lines, the purpose of the lines are, or of solids, is more related probably to the representation of an object. While with Revit, you cannot draw, you can only input information within the model, and the representation is like an output. So at least in my head, it's not something that I read somewhere, but using it, the really different is this one. If you want to represent something, to draw something, AutoCAD can be the way, and you can add information in that context, but still is not a BIM methodology application, at least as far as I'm concerned.
So the differentiation is the representation itself, right? Because at the end, I mean, we can use even text editor to add information to, I mean, to any building, right? So I think what, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Revit is the differentiation of Revit is that in the representation and the interaction, the human interaction with the software.
Yes. Let's say it's the main difference is that they are designed with two different purposes. So the Revit is focused and is based on object. AutoCAD is based on line and drawing. So if you want to draw something, use AutoCAD. But you are right telling that if you start programming it and you look at lines like objects, so yes, you could say that you are doing something in the middle. But the way in which the two software are provided, for instance, within a normal day in my job, I will use Revit to design a system, an HVAC system. Then if I have to schematize the system and make like a single line scheme, I use AutoCAD. That's the main, even if I add attributes online, that could be layers, that could be properties, blocks, a bunch of different properties, but probably is still not the BIM paradigm.
Okay, yeah. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for
Okay, so that's the difference. Let's say continuing from here, that's the difference from the two format, and it's important because, for instance, what Mahmoud did within his work was related to the open BIM. What we are seeing today is related to Revit. So they are two different, let's say, way to interact with problems. We saw this one. So very quickly, just to make you understand what we are seeing later, to organize data and information, Revit refers to a hierarchy. This hierarchy has 4 levels. The first one is the category levels, in which we can find the first definition of an object. For instance, we can define a category like furniture. Then we have families that are representing a specific object, but still not defined in all the details that are required. For instance, in the category furniture, we can have a chair that is a generic family. Then we can have different types of chairs. For instance, the one with 3 legs, the one with 4 legs, that are types, but they are all chairs and they are all furniture. And lastly, we have the instance level, in which we are pointing at a specific object. So these 2 chairs that are the same type, the same family, are 2 different things, let's say, in the space. And I will be quick here, but it's important to understand these 4 words: category, family, type, and instances, because we are dealing with a database. Revit is a database, so you have to understand which level you want to query, and because of the information that are stored in a specific level can be affected from the level that are higher, let's say, in terms of hierarchy, sorry. So this is the reason why it's important to understand this reasoning about the Revit software. Here we are talking about Revit. So we are specifically dealing with an Autodesk, let's say, framework. Okay, so we can start and with the first example, and we can explore what properties a Revit object can have. I will be very quick here, just so you will understand. So I hope that all of you are more or less, let's say, aware of the software. If not, simply now we are going to add something in our design space. This is an RDUtil file. We will interact with it through the graphical user interface, but what we are doing now basically is adding information to the database. So what we want to do here is, this is a reminder for me, we are going to draw 4 simple walls, okay? And what we know is that every wall that we are drawing has properties according to the levels, the hierarchy we saw before. This means that we have 4 instances of walls. The type of the wall is in this case a generic type that is thick 200 millimeters, and the parameters that we can see here are related to the type. So we are interacting with this level of the hierarchy. This means if I make a change here, all the instances that are related to this type will be affected from a change. For instance, if I change this coefficient, and I can put 0.5 and go for OK. Also, the other walls will be affected from the change. If I want to interact with the object at an instance level, so I distinguish from instance properties and type properties because I can find them here within the panel of the properties. So here is the single object that is being affected from a change. I can write here Filippo, and this wall will have the change effectively. These other instances won't report the change because we are now dealing with a different level. And there is a way to interact with the information also at the family level and the category, not that much, but a little bit. Family level, there is an old, let's say, topic that we won't go today indeed because
I remember our design firm was developing families that were specific to our firm. So typical things that we use in our design process.
Yes, exactly.
So as a designer, I would be picking from a palette of family types or families to build things, and you don't have to get to that fundamental level. Right?
No. I mean, if you are in charge of developing workflows for the firm, this is what you do.
That's
for instance, yes, you have to organize and think how they will be used, which parameters they need, and stuff like this. If you are a specialist, this specialist, you simply work with the families that someone else did.
Right.
What
Okay.
about the vendors that like provide the ducts or something? Do they provide the BIM files for free?
There is a huge industry that is moving around this kind of stuff. Mostly, I'm a mechanical, electrical, plumbing specialist, so this is let's say my field, and there is like a bunch of new websites, a bunch of new corporates that are providing their products for free. So you can use them, also providing, let's say, analysis software that are embedded within Revit, and they are developed basically based on what we are going to see today. Magicad, for instance, that is a Irish corporate, if I remember well, is increasing hugely their revenue thanks to the increasing demand of mechanical, electrical, and plumbing stuff within Revit, because the mechanical aspects of a building are is the one that probably is the most useful in terms of BIM model, because after you design a system and you know exactly which are the components and this kind of stuff, when they build it, it's easier to understand all the main aspects of the design. Okay, so here we let's say inserted some instances within the Revit file, Revit database. We are writing something somewhere in a database that is not showing now, but we will see later. And in addition to this, we can also insert within the project instances that are not physically, let's say, existing. And this is the case of a room, for instance. A room is not something that is existing within the environment. But if you consider the room an object, you can insert within the project, and so you can use all the information to insert logical entities within your project. And it's the same, let's say, way in which you can also input duct systems. That is not something that is existing. Let's say supply system or return system is a logical entity that you can input within the software. Okay, so that was for the ones that have never seen Revit, the first, let's say, exercise that I wanted to propose you. We will use later again this kind of project to go in a further step. Okay, so do you have any question until now about Revit or what we saw? Okay, then we can start talking about Dynamo. Dynamo is a visual programming interface that is embedded within Revit environment. So basically, as we were talking before, people started feeling the need to customize workflow, basically. So the graphical user interface that Revit was providing sometimes was not enough. For this reason, they started developing Dynamo that is easier to use with respect textual programming language, and so can be used also from architects, engineers that don't have a background in the programming field, but still it's more or less the same thing. We will see it. It's similar to Grasshopper for Rhino, or if you work with Sensor, to LabVIEW. Is made of blocks that has input and that have input and output, and you can link the information, creating a logical workflow on a canvas. This is what basically Dynamo is. You can use it by thanks to a sandbox version, so without using it within a platform like Revit or Maya, or you can use it like we will do within the Revit environment, so as a sort of plugin. It has a huge community that is contributing in finding new workflow and new way to develop different kind of application. And also, is it possible to find the source code from GitHub? And okay, so basically I will be quick here. Dynamo enables let's say, enables the designers to develop custom solutions. This is what is the best definition that I can give about Dynamo. And as I told before, is an analog of Rhino and Grasshopper, Revit plus Dynamo. And the main, let's say, the main results that you can obtain by using Dynamo are computational design. So basically you can play with geometry and you can create new shapes. For instance, Zadi, that is was a famous architect, they are very skilled in this kind of usage of Dynamo. You can use also for analysis purpose, both for structural engineering and energy engineering, because basically it gives you access to a programming language. So whatever you are able to program outside Revit, now you can do using the information that are linked to the object we saw before.
Is the engineering equivalent to Grasshopper?
Sorry?
Is,
It's architecture.
is this like the engineering equivalent to Grasshoppers? Like architects, they use Rhino, then there's Grasshopper. It's like a
Rhino is like Revit, let's say. It's not a BIM platform.
But the program, just Dynamo, it's like, is there any
like
fundamental
Grasshopper.
difference?
It's more or less the same, but it's related to Revit API.
But Rhino Grasshopper is a more generic design tool, right?
Yes, it's more for architects, let's say.
Whereas Revit Dynamo is very much focused on buildings.
Are you can use Rhino for stuff in buildings?
Yes, Revit is used in any industries that is related to design. So even ring design or what, like boat or cars, everything.
Right, Rhino, you can design spaceships, whatever, I mean.
Yes, everything. And of course, there are architects that are using, because before with Revit, you couldn't manage the difficult shapes. Now it's possible because of Dynamo, actually, because the families are quite restricted to some properties that you couldn't create crazy shapes.
So they are basically, let's say, similar, but for instance, within Rhino, you don't have access to structural properties. I mean, you can input them, but there is no given slot from by default.
But in Revit, it's very focused on buildings.
Yes, yes.
Like construction buildings, that's.
Construction industry.
You wouldn't design a car in Revit.
You can.
You wouldn't do it.
You don't want.
It would be silly, right?
Yes.
Okay. How long has Dynamo been around?
I don't know how 10 years, maybe more.
Yeah. Michele, do you know?
I don't know exactly, but people are start using it 6 years ago, not more. Before, just developers.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this did not exist 10 years ago, let's say, which is why Rhino Grasshopper became so popular with architects, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Okay.
But also Grasshopper, as Michele is very good in using it, it has a huge community that is developing this
A
stuff.
lot of momentum, yeah.
Now Dynamo is, let's say,
Creeping into the market.
exactly, and
Okay.
it's more and more used by designers and engineers. Cool. Okay, so let's see how it looks like, and I will show you also a quick example of how you can play with geometry within Dynamo. So to open it, you simply go to the Manage tab, and this is an important, let's say, step, because it makes you understand what can you do with Dynamo, and you can launch it. It takes a while, sorry for my machine performance.
But Dynamo as a software is a similar technology as Revit, or is it completely like from scratch?
It's another project.
It's completely different because it's open source. Okay.
Yes, it is related also to Revit, but as we saw before, you can use with a standalone version.
And since it's open source, does that mean that it was initiated by the community, or was it initiated by Autodesk and made open source?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Michele, do you know?
No, I don't know that.
Okay, never mind.
Okay.
It's an open question.
So this is how it looks like. You have basically this part of, this is the canvas in which you can put information and start doing stuff. On the left part, you have all the basic commands. So for instance, if we want to make, let's say, a point, we can start by insert. This is very similar to Grasshopper, for instance. So you can input 3 numbers, and you can create let's say you can choose to run it manually, so by clicking, or automatically. This is the case here, and so you made your point, let's say. So this is how it works. You have inputs on the left part and outputs on the right part. So this point can, for instance, then be moved. So you want a vector, you want a move command, and that's basically how you can interact with it. And yeah, we will see, let's say in further detail. Only this is first part is only to give you a taste of how it looks like, and you can also interact with the geometry part of the canvas, that is this one. Okay, so you can interact with geometry in this way. So if you click this other button, you are interacting with the code, let's say with the properties you are inputting. And okay, so this is the interface. I don't know if you have question about it. I don't think we say much, but okay. So let's go to the next project. That is the one I already developed before. And in this case, for instance, this is the first example of how it works. If we run this script, what we are doing here is we are creating a range of coordinates to generate points. Thanks to the links that can be edited here, like lacing, we can cross the product of the coordinate we are using. Then we can flatten the list. You're familiar with Python, so I won't stress this point. And then, as I told you, we can, for instance, move using vectors, and we can create a list of points, create lines that are based on the points we created, and this is very similar to Python because it's based on lists. So we are creating a list of points and then moving a list of points. So when you apply the line function, the arguments are sorted, and it's easy for you to understand what you want to accomplish. And then basically with a little bit of math, you can create an algorithm to manage the height of the columns. So this is a stupid, let's say, example, but that can give you the idea of a basic script in terms of computational design. And the cool stuff is that you can move the attractor, that is the point on which the equation that regulates the height of the column is based. So by moving it, you can change the shape of your design, basically. Sorry, we have to set the automatic version. So you can move it, and the software evaluates which are the difference in terms of distances between the points and in a planimetric view, and it simply elaborates the script. And this is how let's say this is the a beginning if you want to work within the computational design field. And so this is how it works. Let's say it's basically is having a Python script that is spread all over a canvas. So it's easier to interact with, and yes, in terms of geometry, that's pretty much it. You can manage surfaces, solids. It's very useful for let's say construction related purposes, not only from the architectural and design point of view, but yes, that's how it works. And then I will also suggest you some resources if you are interested in this kind of aspect. Okay, so let's go on and go to obviously, like Python, Dynamo has packages. That is the ones we can see here on the left, and it's a collection of nodes, basically a package. And they are used to extend Dynamo's core functionality. So if you need something more that is developed from third parties, you can add to your scripts. And I can suggest some of the main important if you start working with it, that are Archilab, Bmorph Node, Clockwork, Modelica, Orki, and MapPower if you are working with mechanical, electrical, and plumbing industry. And they are, let's say, all the ones that I've listed here are related to Revit API. So even if we are not still yet able to interact with them, remember it. I will share with you the presentation, because this is what you need to not reinventing the wheel while you deal with Revit API.
Are those companies or they're
Kind of people willing to
like open source projects?
It's all open source.
Community driven.
Yeah, it's like Python, let's say.
Okay. But then you might have companies that are commercial open source models that support the implementation of this stuff, but they charge like consulting fees.
Yeah, there is like Patreon or this kind.
Yeah.
And this one are for free.
Yeah, but I mean, it's open source, but
Yeah, it's the same for Food for Rhino, where people, it's like a container where everyone can develop its own, let's say, plugin that for Grasshopper in that case. The same is for Revit. And usually the companies, they start beta test. So it's free at the beginning, like Diva also was like that. And then when it becomes a real software, they start putting license.
okay.
Yeah, but most of them are totally free.
Let's say also that if you are able to interact with APIs and to write Python code, you can repeat what they do in most of the cases, not everything, but okay. So Dynamo gives us access to the Revit database. So what we did before by inserting objects thanks to the Revit interface, we can do the same by Dynamo. And so I encourage you to see Revit not like a design, a drawing, but like a database. So like a huge sheet in which you can insert data. And this data can be inserted by multiple users, let's say at the same times. This could be like tricky because you know, when you make a design for a building, you are working with many people in the same time. But what the Revit database is able to use is the concept of transactions. It's similar to what happened with banking accounts, in which if you want to modify the same account in the same time, the software is like avoiding you to make so. So Revit does basically the same, and this is the reason why multiple users can contribute in the same time at the same project. And as we underlined before, thanks to Mahmoud's comments, the representation of the object is only one information that can be evaluated by the software. And as we underlined before, it's important to take into account the hierarchy of the software when you want to interact with the parameters. And we saw before what parameters are. They are basically slots for data, and you can use them to both by default from Revit to insert data like area, height, or width, length. But you can create custom parameters, and thanks to this, you can really start to input data within the Revit database. Okay, let's see how Dynamo can give us access to the database. Okay, so first of all, what we can do is point the database, because Dynamo by default makes you, let's say, talk to the current project that you are developing, but is not, let's say, if you are familiar with Python, usually you have to specify the environment in which you want to do stuff. In Dynamo is the same. If you are not familiar with this kind of topic, it's not important, because the current document is the one that you are using when you are using Python. But for instance, if you have several files linked to the one you are using, you can also choose to point another file, another document that is another database. Okay, so again, if you want to query the database, what we need to do is interact with it thanks to the hierarchy. So if we want to access all the walls in the project, we want to access all the elements of a category. As we saw before, we have input and output. We have to find the right category. We want to access the wall properties. We can also make this. And these are the four walls we draw before. So it's a different way to look at them, but they are basically the same. Now, if we want to access the database without looking at this properties palette here, that is the one that Revit is suggesting us, we can simply ask Dynamo to access the same parameters, thanks to a node that is specifically designed for this kind of application. Let's say that we want to know the area of this wall. What we can do is get the parameter value by name, is asking us to input elements here, but is asking also to input a parameter name. And if you hover the mouse here, you can see that the format of the parameter name has to be a string. So you can open this window by right-clicking here, and you can use a string to write area. And like we told before, is a list, like a Python list. So you are querying all the elements that are related to this category, because this is what you ask or to the software. Okay, so these are, thanks, I didn't think about it, but it's very important. So thank you, Mario. These are the ID of the object in Revit. That means that every instance has a specific ID. And when you work with Dynamo, when you start working with Dynamo, this is fundamental, because it's the only way to make a one-to-one relationship with objects. So if you, for instance, want to use another way to interact with it, you can go here and see the ID of selection. This is the, let's say, the code thanks to which you can make the same object speak to different kind of software. For instance, if you are performing clash detection and you want to know which wall is involved in a clash, you relate to this kind of.
This is unique, and it's just
it should be like stable and immutable over the time, but it's not. There is another property, but it is not accessible if you're not using the API. That is the unique ID. That is like once it's created, it will never change. This is if you update the model to different version, or if you crash it can change. So they Autodesk specifically tell you to, okay, if you are dealing with this kind of stuff, consider that it can change. Unique ID that is more difficult to access is stable. So you can rely on that.
and why should we use this at all?
Well, sorry.
Like, if it's not unique, what's the point?
It's, let's say it's unique in terms of if you don't have troubles with the model or this kind of stuff. But if you want to preserve the model for years, for instance, you would like to refer to unique ID. It's different because these are let's say shorter, are easy to access from the graphical user interface. If you want to access the unique ID, I don't know why they did like this, but it's more difficult.
I think unique IDs are handy to have in any data model.
Yeah, but it's different from the normal ID, let's say.
No, I don't mind just having two IDs, and one is somewhat unique and the other one isn't. Understand them very deeply.
I kind of agree with you, but it's how it is developed. So I think that there should be a reason. I'm not aware of which the reason is, but there should be a reason for this.
Okay, I can accept it.
Okay.
The birthday boy he wants to know some knowledge, man. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. So yes, and what we can do, yeah, we got information from the database. In the same way, you can add information, and for instance, you can set a parameter by name that is more or less the same thing. Let's say that we want to use the comments parameter, and we can use this string, and the elements are the same. So what Dynamo did here is comment all the walls in the project with this string, and that is the base. For instance, when we want to use this kind of workflow for making quantity takeoff and to make like cost estimation, this is how you have to interact with the software. It's not that easy. You have to like have a database from which you retrieve information about the cost.
So quick question about cost estimation. In Italy, the cost estimator where does it sit? Is it inside the design firm, design or construction firm, or both, or is it a third party, or?
Usually we have to provide a cost estimation with the design part
In the design team.
in the design team.
But then the contractors that's design build though, right? Where you're working with the contractors. Anyway, I'm just trying to, because in our program in PFM, like these three students here, you guys learn cost estimating, right? Or what's it called here? Quantity surveying, right?
Yes.
You probably didn't use this, right? Stuff like this.
How do
Did you use Revit at all? Okay.
Yeah, but I think we changed the format to like manual measurements instead of
When was that change happen? So they went from Revit to manual.
Yeah, I think project didn't work out, right?
It was too difficult to. Okay.
let's say that in this way, we have like a bunch of Excel files that are fixed. So at the end of the procedure, we simply with Python link the information, push a button, and have like information related to real prices on the market. So
Because but real quick, so for you guys, manual means you have a digital document and you're like using your finger to count. Like what does that
We
mean?
have to take.
You print it off,
Yeah.
and you use a pencil.
But that's for like the most basic. No, I'm not sure.
Okay. In the real companies, do they do that? They still print everything off, they use rulers.
I don't think so. Yeah. I think I'm okay.
but how do you estimate the quantity of the Excel? Is kind of after you count this.
So you have like a digital document and you're taking digital measurements, but you're then manually putting them into an Excel document probably. Perhaps. Okay. We don't spend a lot of time on it. I was just curious. They tried to get me to teach quantity surveying one time, and I was like, I don't even know what that is. I have to like Google quantity surveying. What is that? Oh, cost estimation? Yeah, I kind of know, but I don't know anything about that.
Actually, it's pretty good if you do like this, because people work to insert data, then you query them, and you find the link between the object and the price. I really like it. And you can monitor while the project is growing up, how much are you spending. So for instance, you can tell the designer, guys, stop with the DAX because we are running out.
But to do that kind of advanced use of BIM, all the users in the BIM environment need to be kind of on the same page, right? Like you can't have a design firm building a BIM model with no thoughtful process of cost estimation link, right? Because your cost estimator can't just come and take a model that wasn't designed for cost estimation and just they have to like map it and things, right? Because my impression of BIM is it's an amazing tool, but it's limited by the user using it properly, right? Or using it thoroughly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's true, but it's also normal. Also, Python is a beautiful tool, but
Right.
it depends on how people
Exactly.
What
use it.
about like ecological impact?
LCA, they have plugins. It's called LCA one click. That is not one click, but
But if you have a beginner Revit user building a Revit model, and then you want to use that model for any kind of assessment, and none of the things like they're picking the wrong types and they're picking the wrong families, or they're building their own stuff, and so that's always been my impression, is that if you have that quality level of a BIM model, you can't use it for basically anything except chopping it into like.
and also not for that kind of application, because if you're not able, but this is the reason why you have coordinators.
Right.
Because a coordinator usually is a person that is not like 40 years old, but it's like a person that knows basically what do you need from the model,
And you
tell
can
people how to do that.
And with Dynamo, you can build probably validation tools, right? Like
Yes.
this BIM designer actually built the design in the way that we need it to be in order for it to be useful for other things. So as a BIM coordinator, maybe you're running these things in the background, like, is this person doing a good job or a bad job?
This is what I would like to do with GNN, with graphical neural network.
Ah, that's interesting. Using
This-
prediction. Okay, yeah.
This is what I would
All right,
like
sorry,
to
let's get going to that.
do.
I'm slowing you down.
No, I'm happy that you had question. Okay, I forgot where we were. Okay, so we accessed the database in a different way, let's say. So by avoiding to use the Revit interface. What we can do now, okay, is talk about Revit API. Probably you all know what an API is, but just to be sure that everyone is on the same page. API, I like to call API like a recipe, let's say. So everything you need, you can find there. Revit has very, very developed API that are accessible for users. So you can basically make anything, because Autodesk understood that the need of the users to have custom solutions. This is why they give all the access to the Revit API, and this is the reason why I'm using it. So how can you access the Revit API? We saw that Dynamo as, let's say, is a medium step from the graphical user interface for normal user that is kind of fancy for developers, but that are not still able to code. The next step is learn how to code and use the Revit API. And for this reason, Dynamo has a Python script node in which you can simply code inside and starting using Revit API. Let's say that the best language that you should use, you would like to use is C#, because Revit refers to the .NET framework. So everything that is compliant with the .NET framework, that like C#, Visual Basic, .NET, this kind of programming language could be the best way. But because of Python, it's very easy to learn. And it's also quite easy to translate from C# to Python. Let's say that 99% of users is using Python instead of C#. But I wanted to be honest. So if I knew C#, probably I would have been using it.
And that kind of sets, I think that sets you apart from being a user of programming to being a professional software developer.
Yes.
Like if I want to learn how to manipulate data, I learn Python. But if I want to actually develop production ready software, I probably learn C#. I learn Python, I learn everything. Right? I kind of.
Yes,
right,
yes. It's. I mean, I try, and C# is not so difficult, but to use at the same level that I am able to use Python, it will take a while. So
And there's a lot of architects in the community who transition into being software developers.
Yes, yeah,
They
there
start
is
their- they
because
start
there is
tech
a
companies.
big demand
Yeah.
for this kind
Yeah.
of professionals, because you have to have a basic knowledge of the architectural field, but then you shift to be a like sort of programmer.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the websites that, in my opinion, are fundamental to start interacting with Revit API. This is the first one, Revit API docs. That is how you can query the Revit API. So if you are looking for something, you have to know the basics. We will see something today together, but for instance, to make the same thing that we did before for collecting all the instances of a certain category and translate them to elements, we can use a filtered element collector that is a class of the Revit API. And basically what you are able to do here, when you find the class you are willing to use, you can really find everything here. It's very well documented and is
Oh, goodness.
okay. So this is how, let's say, and as you see, there is no Python theoretically
Right.
here. So you have to, it's a different way to interact with the interface, because you have to declare stuff, but I'm not really expert in this field, but it's easy to convert. You start learning by doing it. So you try the first one. No, this is the attribute, this is the properties, this is the one the function is asking me, and then you simply learn how to write what you have here in Python. It's quite easy, and you can also find a bunch of examples online.
Is that where the iron Python, like, isn't that like a mapping between Python and this API? Is it the Python, the Revit Python shell?
Yes,
basically what
but
it is?
yes, but you have to write you have to translate it from C#. I mean, here you find C#.
Right.
If you want to use within the Revit, I haven't tried about the.
Okay, keep going, keep going, keep going. I
the-
keep stopping you.
No. But if you want to use it, at least as far as I know, and I'm very, let's say here, calculative, I don't know, because, but as far as I know, you have to write directly in Python. To know how it's written in Python from C#, you have to find a million steps. This is how I do it. And we will see an example of this filtered element collector here. But what I wanted to show you is this website, Revit API docs, in which you can find everything you need about the Revit API. The other two websites I want to show you is, this is the Revit Lookup. Then we are going to see within the Revit environment, that is basically an interface, a Revit plugin developed by Jeremy Tamik, that is the Autodesk developer. And thanks to this plugin, you can access the metadata of the instances. So you can go behind the graphical user interface. I will give you an example here very quickly. So if you have this wall that is selected, you can use Revit Lookup to snoop the current selection and go behind what Revit is showing you now. So you can go here and go to the built-in class, the built-in, let's say, level of the properties. The built-in are the metadata. There is nothing behind them. So when you go here, you have the internal definition, and they are beautiful because they are not related to the language in which you are using the software. They are like pure information, and you can access it. And for instance, these are properties. So for instance, if you want to access the category, like thanks to a built-in parameters using the property as value string, in Python, you will simply put a dot and then query the method or the property, and I remember maybe it's a method of as value string. And this is also a very useful plugin to interact with Revit API. Okay, so sorry. Jeremy Tamik is the guy who is in charge of developing this project. Okay, yes. the screen view. Okay, about the resources to learn about Python inside Dynamo, I suggest the Dynamo Python Primer. That is kind of the manual in which you can find how to start coding within the Revit environment using the basic of the Revit API. And this is the note that I want to give you, that it is within Dynamo, you can use Python 3, that is not Iron Python, but is C Python, only with 2022 version and plus. So with previous versions, you don't have access to C Python. That means that, for instance, what we are doing with Chuanfu should be done in a different, let's say, way. So, but let's say that from now on, we won't have this problem anymore. It's not, let's say, immediate to install C Python packages when you start using it. So if someone is interested, I can show how to do that, but I don't want to waste time now. It's a basic procedure to set your Dynamo and to install new packages. Here we have the Revit Python shell. So other two ways in which you can interact with Python within Revit and Dynamo, within Revit without using Dynamo, is the PyRevit. That is an add-in that simply gives you the opportunity to develop push buttons and add-ins in Revit language. Iron Python, but is starting to support also the C Python framework. So also Eran Ujad, that is the guy who's developing it, is shifting to the C Python. And the Revit Python shell, of course, that is the best thing in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Darren Thomas
Darren
is
Thomas,
responsible, yeah.
Yes, I didn't have the opportunity to meet him, but let's say that I knew about the Revit Python shell. Is probably the best way to interact for the first time within the Revit API.
So he's kind of left the industry. I don't know if he still supports this. He's not getting paid to support this. There must be a community, I guess.
But I started doing Python stuff inside Revit thanks to Revit.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed my first.
You would love Darren. He's a lovely person.
I would like to meet him one day.
So Mario and I both worked with him. Martine, Architecture and Building Systems is our old group.
So if you want to start to interact with the Revit API, I suggest to download. There is also a good YouTube video that is from that Binger that is showing how to use, how to install. It's easy and it's a good way to start interacting with the Revit API. Cool. And you have in the presentation, I will send you all the links to the installation form. So I think I have to be a little bit quicker. Okay. Let's see how the API looks like within the Revit environment. Opening the next example. Okay, so what we have here is a basic example on using a filtered element collector class. As you can see, this is how Python looks like, a Python block looks like. So in a canvas, you will see the same thing of another node, but in this case, it contains a huge quantity of code. And okay, let's focus on this part. In this case, we want to collect all the walls within the project. So we can use this class that is inherited from the Revit database that we imported here. And what you can do that is very, very interesting with the API is that you can query the database from the bottom. So you, in this case, are filtering the elements thanks to a parameter that is in its as-built form is the comments. Okay, so this is how the comments properties that we see in the interface looks like when you want to code the API. And you can use these parameters to access with a filter that is this is another API address that is able to collect all the walls that are commented with BBB. So you have the filter here, you pass the filter to your collector, and you convert the object you have gathered to elements. This is what you do. It's very straightforward. And okay, let's see. I'm gonna leave it for you. And then once you have the walls, what you can do is simply get the parameters, that is another address of the API, to read the comments. Okay, so we have the test if we are gathering the right walls. And I think that in this case, we have two empty lists because our walls were not, it's committed by AAA. But if one of them now is changed to BBB and this is like a restart refresh, we have the wall. This is the ID of the wall, and this is the content. So this is what I do when I access properties, when I access stuff, and I add, remove. It's all based on this kind of activity. And yes, at the beginning could be tricky, interact with the Revit, at least for me, probably for you, it won't be that.
Here. You can't have the output of this Python script in like the Python terminal.
You don't have, if you're asking like, can you print the result
Yeah,
here?
exactly. Instead of going with your thing, Boolean out.
No, the Boolean is because of the because when you have the filter element collector, you have to crash the cycle started to refresh it.
Yeah, I get that.
But it's not, let's say this is only in this case. This is how you can watch your result. There is no way to have like an interactive. No, at least by default, you know, I know that there are some guys that are developing it, but I mean, it would be useful to have like Visual Studio Code within the Dynamo interface. But
so you could query the kernel without having to run the.
Yes,
theoretically,
theoretically. I know that someone is that kind of developing that,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I've never used.
like an IDE kind of,
Never used, I have to be honest.
Can you manage more inputs and more outputs?
Yes, you can manage as many input you want, and output, for instance, here you have the list, so you can slicing it and obtain the first element that in this case is the wall.
Okay, but the output is always one. You cannot put like a name of the output. I don't know, like already the comments or other options, right?
So if you can have multiple outputs here, not in the, you should like make a custom node, but I've never done that because I ever do like that. I obtain my list and then I slice it to.
Okay.
But you can do that. I mean, probably one of these. No, okay, I didn't find the right one. But you can have multiple outputs. It is basically the same. So you can use the link to carry on the output you need.
Okay, thank you.
What's the difference between this and the Revit Python shell?
Revit Python shell, I should have, I didn't have it started in the last version of Revit, but Revit Python shell is, it looks like this. It is more or less like this. So
really integrated into Revit, right?
Yes, it's not like within that.
Revit also running for the Revit Python shell. Oh.
Sorry?
It's a plugin for Revit.
It's a plugin, yes. It's like a different thing with respect to Dynamo.
Like you just showed us a plugin that was called like a sniffer, or like it was
Lookup.
Lookup, yeah. So Revit Python shell is like you have to have Revit running and
It's an admin.
But the functionality, you can do the same thing with both tools.
Yes, you can interact with Revit. So it's kind of the same thing, but Revit Python shell, at least as far as I used it, was for starting some make trials. Not like I mean, you can save and reuse the code you have, but I prefer to use PyRevit because you have like other section, other panels in which, for instance, you can, here we can have another tab called Filippo, and I can add push buttons very easily with respect to the Revit Python shell. It's a different way, but it's the same.
Our old group created another plugin called Design Performance Viewer, which is early stage design integrated into Revit with Energy Plus coupled in there. And it's what our old boss wrote his PhD on, basically, was that. I think it's still in supported, right? Maybe. It was a spinoff. Oh yeah, but anyway. No, I want to see the rest of your presentation. We're running out of time, so let's not.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So now I will be very quick, sorry, very fast. Okay. Let's change the topic and shift the focus on BIM and graphic neural network. So the question here is, why could be helpful, why could be interesting to link BIM to graphic neural networks? Basically because graphic neural networks, like graph in general, provide a better way to deal with abstract concepts. So because of the BIM models are very full of data, full of relationship, full of information, it can be useful to use a graph, like the example we did before, to see how the design is going in terms of relationship. You can have a check on the status of the design. You can see what the Revit interface cannot show to you. So this is why I started to be interested in this kind of application. And what I found some experiences that try to link directly BIM models to graphic neural networks. But what we did here is kind of more simpler, let's say, because it's more simple, because you can go directly from the BIM model to the Dynamo environment into the graphic neural network editor. We did this by using two main tools. The first one is NetworkX, that is a Python package that also Mahmoud used within his work. And thanks to the CPython installed within the Dynamo environment, you can use directly NetworkX. So I had an example in which I would have done by myself the model, and I would have shown you how you can obtain it, but I'm afraid that I won't have time to do that, so I will simply show you a quick video about it. So this is, let's say, like we did before, you can create several environments, and here what we want to represent within the graph is the condition that two rooms are adjacent. So thanks to the code that I can show you before, when you add the room, the software is able to understand where it's placed, and automatically it can generate a neural network based on NetworkX. So is now understanding that the room 1 and the room 2 are separated by walls, let's say. And yes, this is, I wanted to show you the code, but this is the simplest example, so I will skip. But the only problem here is that by using NetworkX, you have to convert the output in a bitmap. So this is the worst part of the procedure, but it's quite easy to use. And you know, I in the next example, I'll show you how I applied this concept to the SDV4, but using Neo4j. So this is basically how it works. And I let's say invented this logical condition of adjacency only to find a way to show a relationship between objects. In this case, the node is the room, the link is the logic condition. Okay, so we can skip. Okay, which are the result of this first approach is that now we are able to, I know how to link Revit directly to Network X based on the API of Revit. The workflow is based on the API of Revit, so it's very easy to switch to another model, and we will see it now. And with Network X, you can also visualize the output within the Revit environment. That is quite comfortable. And but in the same time, Network X is not the best way to graph a neural network, and also you have to convert the chart, the graph, in a bitmap. So it's a little bit more difficult to, it's time consuming with respect to other kind of workflow. Okay, the other way that we found out in the last days is linking the BIM project to Neo4j directly by using Python, basically. So here the methodology we use is, thanks to F strings, we can simply write in Cypher a TXT that can be used within the Neo4j browser. So we define from scratch our net by declaring every node and every relation in Cypher. Obviously with the for cycle, so it's very easy to do. Let's see how it's done. Okay, I need to open another file. This is the SDE4 model that Professor Allen and Chuan Fu kindly gave. Okay, so we can open Dynamo. And this is Neo4j that Mahmoud already showed before, so I won't be stressing this point too much. But basically, what I'm going to use is this Neo4j browser that is basically is a command shell, interactive command shell, in which I can copy and paste Cypher language based text. Okay, I can open the script. So the first part of the script is the same that we show in the previous video. What we do here is create a TXT that is in Cypher language. I show you the code a little bit after I run it.
So you're just, are you using, like, you're just manufacturing this query using Python?
Yes.
Text manipulation.
Yes, because it's, I mean, I could also export a CSV and link inside the, it's the same, let's say workflow, but here
there should be a Neo4j Python shell, right?
There is
right.
kind of this
Yeah.
kind of, but I didn't use it because then I shifted to brick schema. So,
no,
but this is enough, let's say, to use within my corporate probably, because I think that it's easy. It's very easy to obtain that, and you can simply copy and paste here. And after you have the data, is the same model basically that is converted to Neo4j language, and with Cypher you can query the database.
So this web of in your Dynamo model of modules is transforming this relatively complex BIM model into a more simplified manifestation of the relationships in the nodes. Is that right?
Basically what he is doing now is he's considering all the rooms in SD4. He's deconstructing the geometry of the rooms by obtaining only the vertical surfaces. And then starting from the barycenter of each surface, he makes 2 points, one in the 2 directions, and use the points to understand which room is adjacent to the other one. So if you have the double condition, it matches the room and gives you the output. And what Python at the latter part of the script is doing is basically now here inside is let's say retrieving information from the objects, and then is writing this information with this F string into a cipher. Is a TXT, but that is written in cipher. And the way in which I organize the input, it's very, at least I really like it because it's very easy. So if you have the name, number, if you want to add another properties, you simply can copy the last one and add another information, and we will find the same information within the Neo4j editor. So now this is the last one. So simply control plus CTR C CTR Q. And here we have the same thing we saw in the game model with the SD4. So all these are rooms. If we we can see all the properties. That this is the reason why I'm happy that it's easy, because everything you need cost finish, everything you can embed in a net, and then you can also write the relationship. So as I told you, I isolated only the vertical faces. So probably these groups of items are the let's say the levels, because I'm only interacting with the vertical surface. So if we go here, for instance, this is first story, yes. Okay, I made some check, but just to be sure. So this is the same object, and if I use the ID, is the same that I can find here, and I expect to find it at the first floor. So okay, this is this one, and he has 1, 2, 2. Yes, this is more or less how 2 nodes that are in, and this is, let's say, a different point of view on the BIM model. It's basically the rule that it's a plane. It's only which room is near to the other, but you can do that with every kind of the building aspect. And I will skip a little bit on the results. That is basically it worked. So I'm it's a good thing, and I think that it's a very interesting way to look at the BIM model. But let's go to the last application. That is the one that I like the most. That is with the brick schema. So I won't spend too much, but Chuan Fu will tell us what is brick and how it's made. So this is like quick bullet points to understand what is going on. And basically what we try to do is converting a BIM model in a brick schema model without using an IFC file. This is what we do. And okay, so we are working on this kind of relations because Brick wants to talk to every phase of the building's life. And this arrow here is quite, let's say, unexplored right now. So we are trying to find a possible way to convert a BIM model to Brick schema. And as you can see, Brick is very, very similar to a neural network in a very simplified way. But sorry, Chuanfu, you will explain in a better way, but just to give the details of what we are seeing. So in the same way, we converted the model with Network X and with Neo4j, we can do by, we can convert the model to an RDF schema. That is the schema that is used from Brick. So by using RDF-lib, that is a Python package, we can convert in a turtle file, that is a TTL file, in this case, the model. And because of the model now is the Brick schema started from the idea of linking also BMS data inside the building. The last application is focused on the sensors and on the electrical, let's say, panel that are able to control the sensor inside the room. So let's open the last model. Okay, so what we have here in orange, we have sensors. These are data devices categorized with Revit API, so it's everything. Like if you use Revit, you should do something like this. These are air terminals that are inside the same room of the sensor. So the basic rule is here is that if the sensor is in the same room of the air terminals, the sensor is controlling the air terminals. Then these sensors are controlled by a panel board that is controlling the whole floor. We have two floors, first floor and second floor. And the control panel of each floor is controlled by a central control. So we expect to find something similar in the Brick schema that we can deduct from this kind of model. Okay, so basically I can reopen the script and make it run again, but we are running out of time, so I have already and then you can visualize the model that you obtain thanks to this web tool that is related to the brickschema.org site, that is the official website. So you have this viewer, in which you can load your TTL file that was extracted thanks to Dynamo. We can then open it also with a text editor to see how it looks like inside. And this is what is the final result. So you have the central control that is related. We can also use label to, okay, so that are controlling and feeding the plane control panel, that are controlling the VAV, that are controlling the terminal. And all these, this is kind of, it's another way to express logical relationship. So it's not that huge, but if you think that he's speaking now the same language of a brick model, because this is written in RDF schema. So what if I open this turtle file that is obtained directly from Revit, and the machine assistance, this is a brick model basically of something that doesn't exist and is useless, but the concept behind it is this one. And we went through it today with Chuanfu, And the next step that we are trying to take is to use this language to integrate in the same model also data from BMS. So they are already more or less written in this way. He showed me the Greek model of the SD4. So probably it's, and the other cool thing is that we can also integrate by creating, if required, new Brick Classic third parties elements within the same model. And okay, so that's more or less all. I leave you all the links that you.
Cool. Okay, Filippo, thank you so much. Obviously, there's a lot of really interesting philosophical discussions that we could build on top of this, because the question really is then, okay, we can decompose our models into these graph-based models, and then we can leverage all of those machine learning techniques that are available to do various things. Well, great, but what do we want to do, right? And I think validation of models and prediction of, just predicting and classifying things. Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. I think it's fascinating.
Yes, I'm a little bit sad that it took.
It's mostly my fault.
No. I was happy that we
Yeah,
were reaching
okay.
the discussion.
But this was great because it was a step-by-step overview of the foundation, and then I think anybody here who's interested could take that in a different direction. I know Sean Food and you guys are working together, but anybody else that goes, that goes into this direction, practically in industry or research-wise, this is very helpful. So I appreciate it. Do we need to move to the school conference room? I think we do. Okay. Is it? Okay, so
can they go to the other room?
but we might have Martine and Federico and other people joining us, so we need a bigger space. So we're gonna, we're gonna go ahead and close this session on Zoom, but we're gonna re-log in here in about 5-10 minutes, and we're gonna be in a different room. So thanks a lot for your participating. And of course, everyone can reach out to Filippo on Slack and have those philosophical debates. That's great. Mahmoud says thank you. Of course, this is very Mahmoud, you're also definitely in this direction. Great. Okay, thanks guys. We're gonna close this out. See you guys in a bit, or whoever wants to join the next meeting.